All right, John. Thank you very much. I appreciate the time to come out and talk to you guys. Cracking the code, the role of information security in teams. So, it sounds like we're going to be talking about teams and the importance of programs, and I am. I will talk about that. But before you get to the end of this presentation, I'm going to show you an unpatched vulnerability in the Windows operating system that can be used to bypass digital signatures, application whitelist, antivirus software that will probably never be fixed in your operating system and that most of you probably haven't heard about. So we'll talk about that. And I want to talk about that vulnerability in the context of what I'm talking about today, which is coding and how important is coding to being in information security. It's a question that I get asked all the time from people who are considering taking my classes 673 and 573. A little bit about me. My name is Mark Baggett. I do penetration testing, incident response consulting. I'm a senior. The slide says I'm a senior instructor, but as John mentions, I was just promoted to faculty, SANS faculty staff very recently. I offer a couple different courses, including 573, which is automating information security with Python, 673, which is advanced 573. We pick up where we learned there and where we left off in 573, and we talk about some more of the advanced concepts in automation, such as logging, multi-threading, multi-processing, things like that. And then also the co-author with another excellent gentleman who's going to be here talking to you today, Charlie Goldner, on SEC 406. I got my SANS degree, GSE, and this thing at the bottom is pretty cool here. So here you see a command line run on a Linux system where I'm going through all of the directories, all the subdirectories of Metasploit, and I'm just looking for my name and then doing a word count minus L to count how many times my name appears in the Metasploit framework. And you can see that it appears 7 times. And I think the coolest thing about that is, one, well, who doesn't want their name to appear in Metasploit? That's pretty cool, but I can't claim credit for that because I didn't write anything in the Metasploit framework. I've never written a module or done anything. This is totally people in the information security community who have given me credit for techniques or tools that I've come up with and then talked about publicly or turned into Python tools. And then they turn those into Metasploit framework tools. So that's pretty cool. And just thanks to the community for doing that. So let me talk about the question that I'm always asked that I think is the wrong question. And I just did a couple of quick Google searches to pull articles that are actually discussing that question or posts on social media. Do I need programming for cybersecurity, or does working in cybersecurity require coding, or do you need to know how to code to be in information security? Do you need to know how to code to be successful in information security? Why cybersecurity pros need to know how to code? I think that this is the wrong question. To me, this is the most boring question that there is. I'll give you a spoiler alert. My answer to this question is no. You don't need to know how to code to be successful in information security. So if I said yes, we could point to dozens and dozens of people who are very successful in information security that don't know how to code. So I'm not interested in this question. The answer is no. But the more intriguing question to me is not this question. My question is, why is this the question that we always hear asked? Why do people ask the question? Do you have to know how to code to be to be successful in information security? Why don't they ask the question, do you have to know Wireshark to be successful as a network defender? Do you have to know AI to be successful as a network defender? Or do you have to know how to secure S3 buckets to be a successful AWS security engineer? Or do you have to know what the Windows registry forensics is, or Windows registry is and how it works in order to be successful as a forensics examiner? Why don't we hear these questions? And I think that the answer is, well, because these are all pretty industry specific, but it doesn't matter what industry you're in. The reason we hear the coding question is because if you're in forensics, if you're in defense, if you're in offense, it doesn't matter. you're all running into limitations that are imposed upon what you do every single day by the tools that you use, right? Tools have a certain set of capabilities, and we often find ourselves needing capabilities that go beyond those tools. And I think that if it's not that intuition of, I know I'm running into all these limitations from the tools, do I have to be successful? Do I have to know how to code to be successful, get past these limitations? If it's not that intuition, it's the hours that you spend on the internet just searching for the right tool to do this particular job, right? I need to do this. And I've looked, none of the tools that I have now are capable of doing it. Let me go out on the internet and see if somebody's written a tool to do that. So you spend all this time, and all of those things are building this question in people's mind of, do I have to be, if I'm really going to be successful, do I have to be able to code? And I don't think the answer is yes. I think the answer is you can be successful in other in information security, even if you don't know how to do that. But we're all going to run into these limitations. And I think that the a more interesting question is, does every network defense team, does every offensive team, does every forensics team, does every team need the capability to code? Does it have to have somebody on their team that knows how to code? I think the answer is, well, yes. I think if you want to be able to respond to the question, if you want to be able to respond to incidents at the speed of the attackers who are writing code, then you have to have the ability to code on your team somewhere, right? Otherwise, you are limited by the response time that is imposed upon you by your third-party vendors, right? We have vendors that write tools for us, and our network defense capabilities, our offensive capabilities, our forensics capabilities are limited by the tools that they write. So I think that every team needs to have that capability on there so that they can respond at the speed of the attacker, not at the speed imposed upon them by some third-party vendor. And then I'll just ask the question, if you're the person that brings that capability to the team, then what do your career prospects look like, right? When hard times come, when the layoffs come, you're not the person that goes, right? You're going to be the person who can code things. So having coding capabilities, right, it lets you get beyond the limitations of existing tools. It also solves all of these other problems that I'm not going to have time to talk about today, such as the limitations of workforce availability, right? When you automate things, when you can take the capabilities of your most advanced people and then use those capabilities to make the people who are more junior in the space able to do things more efficiently, well, that's going to be a win that's going to help for your workforce limitations. The one I'm going to talk about today is research, pushing the industry forward, but there's also career advancements and several other things that I'm not going to have time to talk about. Limitations of existing tools, the limitations of workforce availability. What I'm going to jump straight to today, because we have a limited amount of time, is researching and pushing the industry forward. If I want to develop the next new thing, right? If I want my organization to be ahead of the curve and not just following behind, waiting for other people to develop solutions that we can use to protect ourselves, then I can't just use the tools that are given to me by operating systems and other third-party vendors, right? Just conceptually, think about if you wanted to interface with a web server over HTTP in ways that are not documented, in ways that are outside of the RFCs, right? If I'm going to do that, I can't use a library that was provided to me by the operating system that is going to, implement the RFCs, right? It's there to allow you to interface with things in compliant ways. And so if I only use those libraries, well, then I'm not going to be able to reach beyond the capabilities of those libraries in order to do those interfaces. I have to be able to step back and craft things at a raw layer. Now, of course, we've got fuzzers and things like that that allow us to do those things, but have you looked at fuzzers, right? What are they? They are they are essentially functions that are in programming languages that they'll sometimes provide some configurations and things like that. But I count fuzzing as coding because of the level of configuration that often is required in order to implement those things anyway. Right. So there you're really calling things at a low level that bypass existing libraries in order to get to them. Right. I would say anything that you build on existing tools and technologies is going to inherit limitations that are imposed by those tools. And just to illustrate this, I'm going to talk to you about an unpatched vulnerability in the Windows 11 operating system. So let me get out of slide mode here. Come over here and just open up a terminal window. All right, so here you see a Windows prompt, and at this Windows prompt, excuse me, this is a PowerShell prompt. I'm sitting at PowerShell. Let's just do an ls of and this directory and take a look at files that start with exp. So here I can see I've got explorer.exe, but interestingly, there are two copies of explorer.exe. Now, if you've been using Windows for a long time and you're in the network defense realm, then right now I suspect that your spidey senses are going off. It's like, wait a minute, I cannot have two copies of Explorer. I should not have two copies of Explorer in my Windows systems. And actually, I can't have two copies of explorer.exe in my Windows directory because, well, if you take another file that has the same name and you drop it into a Windows directory, Windows automatically says, hey, there's a file that exists. Do you want to put an open parentheses 1 behind that or open parentheses 2, right? It makes sure all of my file names are unique because by definition, Windows file names must be unique. So that's interesting that this is happening. And at this point, I would ask myself, what's going on, right? And one of the principles that we'll teach you in various SANS classes, including SANS 504 and others, is don't trust anything that your computer tells you, right? Don't just ask your computer the question one way, ask the question multiple ways. So here we've got the PowerShell view. Let's go back to a good old command prompt and ask a command prompt. Hey, what is it that we've got in this folder named Explorer? And here we can see explorer.exe is, well, again, appearing twice in this existing folder. That's interesting. It's a little bit different here, right? Here, the files aren't the same size. Here, they are the same size. So it's like PowerShell and command prompt have a different view of the world. What's going on here? And I noticed that here the dates are different. PowerShell tells me the dates are the same. What's going on here? Now, I would typically think at this point, rootkit, right? Something is lying to my Windows operating system. Something's lying to PowerShell. Something's lying to command prompt. Why is it that they have a different view of the world regarding this particular program? So that might be what I think. So now put yourself in incident response mode. Okay, I'm going to begin investigating this, trying to understand the vulnerability. Right. I think that a mistake that I still see organizations making today is format, reinstall, right? As soon as you see something's wrong with this system, there's something weird about this system. Is this a big deal? I don't know, but I'm just going to format it. I'm going to reinstall it and get a good clean image on that machine and not worry about it. And I think that that's fundamentally a mistake because here you have perhaps your one and only opportunity to dig into this and understand what the tools, techniques, and procedures that are being used by the adversary are on your system. And then once you understand those, you can go automate a process to go and look for this somewhere else in your organization to see what other systems are affected by this same problem. Now, let me show you some bad things to do here. Del explorer.exe, right? Obviously, we don't want to do that because that's just going to, well, erase. Well, I don't even know. What is it going to erase? Is it going to erase the good Explorer? Is it going to erase both of them? I don't know, right? Both of these can't be good Explorers. Let's try and dig a little bit further into this. You know, I might go to a known good system where I have a copy of Explorer and do something like get file hash algorithm MD5 and well, let's just take a look at That. All right, same MD5 hashes. Let's ask maybe SHA 256, SHA 512. All right, so the hashes for these two executables are exactly the same, regardless of what hashing algorithm you use. They're all the same. But okay, but I'm in PowerShell, and PowerShell had, is the one that was confused, thought they were the same size, and that's perhaps the one that's been compromised. Let's try and do something over here from the command prompt in order to verify those hashes. Let's try. Let's see. Well, there is no get file hash that's built into the command prompt, but SigCheck releases this tool. Sysinternals, Microsoft Sysinternals has this tool called SigCheck. And what SigCheck does is it will verify the digital signatures and calculate the hashes of the files that are on there. So, and I happen to have a copy of SigCheck on my system. So let's ask SigCheck to verify the digital signatures of these things, right? Microsoft digitally signs every binary that comes with the operating system. So yeah, we can use this to verify all of our digital signatures. And they're both digitally signed by Microsoft. You can add the -H option in there, and that will also calculate the digital hashes associated with them. Yeah, I can see all the hashes are exactly the same too. So it doesn't seem that that was just an artifact of PowerShell. But here, if you look on the screen carefully at the output of these two different commands, you'll see that there is a slight difference between the output of these two. Now, don't let yourself get distracted by dates and hashes, and it's not a single character in the hash. It's actually in the very first line of output for the two different programs. There is a subtle difference, and I'll let you look at it for just a second before I spoil it for you. Okay. I hear you screaming. I hear you screaming at your screen. There's a space. There's a space after exe colon here. Oh, so that solves everything, right? Okay, that's solve. Okay, what does that solve? That solves the fact that we can't have two files that have the same file name because they're not two copies. It's not two files that have the exact same file name. One of them is named explorer.exe space. They just looked like they were the same when we did a directory listing. And why are they digitally signed? Because it's two copies of Explorer, right? No. What if I told you that this was not a copy of Windows Explorer at all? This is a copy of PuTTY, the SSH client that I've renamed to be explorer.exe space. And it doesn't have to be PuTTY, the SSH client. It can be Meterpreter or insert any malware, Mimikatz, right? Take any piece of malware that I want it to be, that I want to be digitally signed by Microsoft with all the same hashes as explorer.exe, right? And I would challenge you to configure your application whitelisting to not allow explorer.exe to run, right? So I'm going to take any program and I'm going to give it the exact same hashes, digital signatures as explorer.exe. Okay, wow. So how in the world did this get here and what's the point? Well, the point here is that there's a vulnerability in the Windows operating system. And the vulnerability is that the API that's responsible for opening files on the file system, create file, Windows create file, it trims trailing spaces. So when a tool like SigCheck or get file hash says, could you please open up explorer.exe space, right? Explorer.exe space. It doesn't open explorer.exe space. The operating system says, sure, no problem, I'll open that up for you. And it opens up explorer.exe, the legitimate explorer.exe. That's why when it's calculating the hashes of PuTTY, explorer.exe space, it sees the bytes that are associated with explorer.exe. When it verifies the signature of PuTTY, it opened up and verified the signature on explorer.exe with no space, because even though it asks Windows operating system, please open explorer.exe space, the Windows operating system lies to it. And it says, sure, here's a copy of explorer.exe space, and it gives it back explorer.exe, create file trims trailing spaces. Okay, so what's the big deal? Well, this was reported to me, and honestly, when I was a SANS Internet Storm Center handler, I didn't find this, right? Someone reported it to me on SANS Internet Storm Center, and if you're not following isc.sans.org, you should go out there. The handler of the day is often getting reports of interesting things. They write up their diary. SANS Internet Storm Center is a very valuable resource. You also have access to the DShield database and other things that you can review and see, well, scan logs from around the country, around the world. So this was reported to me, and I went to Microsoft and I said, "Hey, Microsoft, here's this thing, and we need to address. You should address this." And Microsoft said, "Well, what are you going to do with this, Mark? Because everything trims the trailing space." And I said, "Well, not exactly everything. As a matter of fact, let's come out here to Explorer and go to Windows, and you go to explorer.exe space, right? And you click explorer.exe space, and it says, what do you want to open explorer.exe space with? Because, well, exes run. Exe space, is that a Word document? Is it Visual Studio Code? What is this thing? What do you want to open it with? So the Microsoft's like, what are you going to do with this? Well, as it turned out, when I had hair, the Windows operating system was limited to 8 characters, a period, and 3 characters. So if I do a dir/x, I can look and see that, well, if a file is not 8.3, then Windows makes this other name for it that is 8.3. And so explore.exe space could also be called explore-1.exe. So I can make it an exe. That's easy enough. Now I just need to go through an API that doesn't trim the trailing spaces. And if I'd like to do that, well, WMIC uses the com module to do this. So I can do this with WMIC. I can say WMIC process call create explor-1.exe, and I can run this thing. Now, when I run it, it's going to pop it up in the background behind all this other stuff. So let me minimize my desktop stuff. Probably should have thought about what is it that you've got on your desktop that you don't want people to see before that's behind my Zoom window. So, okay, move Zoom. All right, so let's run this. And you can see that that's actually PuTTY, right? PuTTY that is digitally signed by Microsoft. That has all the same hashes as Microsoft. Now, this doesn't have to be in the Windows directory. I could stand it up on my own system, right? Stand up a share on my computer system and then put explorer.exe or any file that I want to impersonate the signature of and just name it that file with a space at the end. Okay. Well, how do you create files with a space at the end? Let me just tell you not to do this. Do not do this. Copy PuTTY .exe to quote c:/windows/explorer.exe space. Don't do that because it's going to go through the API. It's going to trim the trailing space and it's going to try to overwrite explorer.exe. Hopefully your Windows operating system will not allow that to happen. Okay. But you don't do this. All the APIs, well, they are going to trim trailing space. And the point here is that the APIs that you've got on your operating system, they act as like firewalls, right? Your kernel has a certain amount of capabilities. And then we have DLLs that consume that, like NTDLL, kernel 32. And then those DLLs are then consumed by user mode DLLs like user 32 shell DLL. And then you've got your programs like SIGCheck and FileCheck and all these other programs at this top level. And they choose the APIs that they go through and they choose the functionality that they're going to have. And if you're going to push the industry forward, if you're going to be someone who's not shackled by the decisions of other developers, then knowing how to code is going to be that capability, is how you gain that capability. So as I said, there's several things and many cases I'd like to make for telling you that every single organization needs to have someone on that team that can write code. And if you're that person, then, well, there's lots of opportunities for you. Now, If you're going to learn to code, Python is just a great choice in programming languages. There's lots of programming languages out there. Python is easiest to learn, in my opinion, of all these languages. I think it's probably the only language that any sane person would try and teach people in a 5-day class. Once you understand Python, you can easily jump between the various languages. PyPL is the popularity of programming languages index maintained by GitHub and just the number of open source projects. I'll just point out that these lines are not uh, in to scale, right? So this is a 30%. This is the 20 line. This is the 30 line, and there's 10. And if you'd like to learn how to code, I have a class called 573, Automating Information Security with Python, where I'm going to teach you making no assumptions, right? We're going to talk about what a variable is, what an if then else statement is. Okay. If you're brand new to coding, I highly encourage you to check out the on-demand functionality. It is a lot to learn how to code in 5 days. And having on-demand where you can pause that material and move through it. There's 120 labs, and there's several weeks worth of lab that are available in the online training environment that go beyond just what we can do in the live classroom. Most students who come to 573 finish about 40 to 50% of all of the labs that are there and leave with a whole nother class worth of hands-on exercises that they can do in that class. If you're interested in this, I do have some more information coming up in the afternoon session. So I've got another talk this afternoon where we'll talk about some of the things that are covered in SANS 673, which is the advanced class, and I look forward to presenting that to you in the next talk. I've got a couple things that I want to just drop here in the chat window that are going to give you some more resources. First, I'm going to give you a link to my Twitter and LinkedIn profiles in the Slack channel. The other thing that I want to give you a link to is a new YouTube channel that I'm trying to start up and give some information on. And that is the InfoSec Toolshed. InfoSec Toolshed is really dedicated to going through and finding the interesting stories about the origins of tools that we've used in information security. You know, people have really changed the direction of information security by introducing new tools and capabilities to us as an industry. And I find myself interested in the origin story. You know, what was Doug Burks thinking when he decided he was going to release Security Onion? It's actually a pretty interesting story that has close ties to SANS and 503. So there's an interesting story, and you can read about Doug's inspiration for that or you can watch a video presentation on that. New video that just released this past week on back orifice. I'm really excited about the back orifice episode that just was released. I think that you'll find it hopefully both educational and entertaining. Okay. And with that, I think I've got till another 3 minutes on my schedule.
Fantastic, Mark. Thank you. So yeah, I just want to back up what Mark said there. Yeah, his new YouTube channel is really, really interesting. Playing, InfoSec tool historian, going out finding these folks that have created these tools that have changed and created in a lot of ways an industry that didn't exist at that point, pointing out some of these flaws and what can be done, and really kind of kicking off all of this knowledge of how we can use tools in unexpected ways and protocols and programming APIs and things that we may or may not have noticed. This demo, I remember you showed me one time, I think it was a couple months back, and I was like, wow, that's a crazy, like, down in the weeds kind of discovery, and certainly has some practical implications there. And yeah, further highlights, like even what Dave was saying, you have to know your tools. He's always talking about that in 503, and him and Andy are pointing out, like, if you don't understand what Wireshark can do, not only will you miss the boat, but you may not have any recourse to make something that will work, right? If you're trying to find these advanced attacks. And so whether it's analyzing packet captures or really anything else, being able to program and create your own tools is certainly a superpower, kind of as you alluded to in your presentation. So really, really interesting stuff there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that in we had more time, I'd show you how Python, you could easily write programs to go out and detect these things. Once you understand that this vulnerability exists, developing a custom detection for this and then deploying that and inventorying your systems to find this is trivially 5 to 10 easy lines of code that I can teach you how to write in 573. I'm sure people have many questions about this vulnerability. And we don't have enough time to go into all of those. But if you would like to connect with me on LinkedIn or Twitter and reach out to me, I'm happy to share more details with you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Mark.
All right, thanks for having me.